everybody, what's happening? Welcome to the indoor version of this weekly guidance. My apologies for getting this out a lot later than I normally would. We don't get to enjoy the beautiful serenity of nature and that whole ambiance with tonight's message, thanks to some technological difficulties that I had today. But I do want to get this out and share that with those of you who have been following along with the weekly guidance for quite a few months now. And this last bit that wraps up this 3 week, it's like been a 3 week series of reflections. The first week we talked about divided mind and just becoming aware of when we are coming from a place of dividing things up, separating them, judging them, shaming them, making them wrong, that kind of thing. And the idea wasn't to do anything in particular with that information, it was just to become aware of it. After all, the whole journey of enlightenment is really just a process of what I would consider to be awakening, a process of becoming conscious, of awake, aware, taking unconscious things and making them conscious, taking the things that we're unaware of inside of ourselves, in our hearts, in our souls, in our minds, our psyches, bringing it to the light of loving awareness. And when I say loving awareness, I mean awareness that accepts unconditionally what is and honors it for what it is. So that was the first week. And then the second week we talked about, we made a leap to loving mind. And we were asked to just reflect on those times and those moments, those people and relationships, those dynamics in which we actually exercise a lot of grace, a lot of mercy, a lot of compassion, a lot of forgiveness. And where and when do we exercise loving mind? And the whole purpose of this reflection was also awareness, to just really kind of recognize and reflect on and really calibrate ourselves to what it's like when we're working in that space or coming from that place. And then there was like a little second piece to that if we were feeling ambitious, and that was can we investigate what's the reason that compels us to move from loving mind. So if I'm going to share just kind of from my experience before we get into the rest of this, I don't know what answer you came up with, what the justification or the reasoning was for why you found yourself compelled to work from a loving place, but if I was going to call it anything, I would call it connection. And I think that's why it's really natural with friends and family and loved ones and partners and kids, nieces, nephews, sons and daughters, that kind of stuff. It's a lot easier for us to show grace, mercy, compassion, and forgiveness in those dynamics and in those relationships, because there's kind of this overriding connection. We recognize that the connection is bigger than one moment or one action or one fault or one flaw. And so we allow some flexibility, right, in the dynamic. We're willing to tackle challenges. We're willing to persevere through frustrations because there's connection there there's connection there that's worth retaining, right? For me, that's what is the driving force for what I would call when I'm coming from loving mind. So as we make this leap now into talking today about unity consciousness, I want to drop this idea and this concept into your awareness this week and allow you to reflect on it well and kind of reflect on what unity consciousness means to you. And unity consciousness is when we see that the divided mind and loving mind really are one and the same. And it's when we view both divided mind and loving mind in ourselves in a unified way, in a holistic way, and also others, right? And recognizing that if we have divided mind and loving mind, which is really all just one mind, inside of ourselves, well, other people have divided mind and loving mind as well. So unity consciousness is this idea, this ability to see ourselves and the forces within us, those dueling forces, that dualistic nature, as one unified thing. And because we can see that in ourselves, and because loving mind has compassion, right? Has grace, has mercy. When we can exercise that kind of grace, compassion, mercy, and forgiveness, and that loving mind with ourselves, and that part of us that comes from divided mind. When we do that, we become much more whole, loving, and accepting of our humanity. The same goes for other people and the people around us, right? Because if we recognize with our unity consciousness, we recognize that we have sort of this dueling nature inside of us. We recognize that dueling nature in someone else. And so when someone's coming from divided mind, we actually can make that leap and that connection to that part of ourselves that we are learning how to love and not judge, right? And to forgive and act mercifully towards. And so then the leap then from there is the unity consciousness views all of everything, right? And the dueling nature of all of reality as one unified whole. And in my opinion, this is so incredibly liberating, even when we're coming from divided mind at times, or if we're caught in the heat of the moment, we're feeling angry, we're feeling riled up, we're feeling jealousy, or whatever it is that comes up, right? Some of those more dense emotions and feelings. If we hold space for unity consciousness, we can immediately address when those sensations arise. We can come at them from a place of love and acceptance. Does that make sense? So unity consciousness is recognizing that divided mind, and that part of us that separates and divides and labels, judges, shames, condemns, sometimes makes wrong, whether it's ourselves or others, it's part of the process, it's part of the technology. And that loving mind is just the polarity of that, right? But unity consciousness is an awareness that all of it is just one thing. And so unity consciousness allows us to sort of dance in both of those worlds, and allows us to extract, the meaning and the lessons and the experiences as they arise. And if we're fixed kind of on staying in that space, or if we allow that to be the place from where we come from, that unity consciousness, even if we're moving through an experience of divided mind, or if we're moving through an experience of loving mind, but that unity consciousness sees it all as one, that's where kind of the depth of God's loving awareness becomes a lived and breathed experience for us. And I say that because God loves all of creation, because God is all of it. God created all of it. We are all God's children because it's all one thing. So unity consciousness is that ability to be able to see. We talked about it in last week's video. The left wing and the right wing belong to the same bird. And so seeing the bird, that whole bird, as one unified being, that's being able to see with unity consciousness. And unity consciousness is our ability, it's an awareness that those dueling natures are in us, that they're out in the world, they're out in the universe, and they're also out in others. And to me, this is a great pathway and a gateway to God's loving awareness. So as we reflect this week on the last 2 weeks, becoming aware of when we're coming from divided mind, becoming aware when we're coming from loving mind, and recognizing that those are just two polarities. They're just opposite sides of the same same circle, or the opposite sides of the same coin, however you want to frame it. This week, focus on exercise, stepping into unity consciousness, and seeing if you can create a little bit of space and a little bit of distance, even in your own experience. And so it can be really easy to perceive this in other people, right? Because we're already an objective observer. We're kind of pulled back viewing. So it's easier to kind of be detached from it. But really, this week for ourselves, see if we can kind of witness ourselves when we fluidly bounce back and forth between these dueling natures. If we can continue the awareness that we built in week 1 and continue the awareness that we talked about last week here in week 2, see if we can now kind of just pull back a little bit and not necessarily judge or shame, and maybe not even be proud of one or the other, right? So can we kind of just pull back and objectively, with this unified mind, recognizing that it's not good or bad, it's all one thing, it's just part of the experience. Can we pull back enough and see our divided mind when it's active and see our loving mind when it's active? And just trying to kind of view them as equals. That's kind of the exercise this week. So the way in which this takes the last 2 weeks a little bit of a step further. It's not just the awareness of one. It's the one of its awareness of both. And then that next step is to be able to kind of like not attach a value judgment to when you are in loving mind, or attach a value judgment to when you're in divided mind. And what that means is we're not shaming ourselves or disappointed or cursing ourselves out when we're like, oh wow, I'm super angry right now, I'm really pissed at that, or I think those people are not very nice things and I said not nice things about them, and not getting hard on ourselves about it, not judging it, but just kind of like letting it be, and just recognizing that that's part of the experience, part of your experience right now that's honest and real. And on the flip side, can you be in loving mind and not pat yourself on the back and throw a big celebration over it? Be so proud of yourself because you're coming from a loving place, because that's just what the moment called for in that moment. That's how you intuitively or instinctively responded or reacted. So there's this unity consciousness. I'm asking you to step back into to a little bit more of an emotional neutrality. So even when emotions are one way or the other, can you have the presence of mind to pull back just a little bit and just kind of witness it? And just witness it. It's a little bit more neutral. It's very Tao. If any of you have studied the Tao Te Ching. But that's the exercise this week. Unity consciousness is the awareness that the dueling nature of reality is all one thing. That's how I would define it. That's what I'm being compelled to offer up, in the weekly guidance. Somebody else might have a different definition. But just because you're here spending this time and sharing this space in the last several weeks with me, just going off of that, reflect on unity consciousness, engage in this exercise, and let me know how it goes for you. I'd be really curious to find out what your experience is, what comes up, how, what are the challenges to kind of pulling back objectively and retaining some emotional neutrality in the face of dueling natures and dueling emotions. But this exercise allows you to step into unity consciousness. And if that's your intention this week, I really would love to hear how the experiment goes. So let me know in the comments below. As usual, I appreciate your time and your energy and your attention, and for spending time here today with me. Unfortunately, not in nature, but in my second room where I've set up this little studio to have other chats like this. So I hope you all have a great week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And we'll talk soon. Peace.